The most valuable skill in this AI era that we're living in, at least in my opinion, and from my experience, what's been very lucrative and very profitable for me amongst many different offers and many different seasons of my career has not been jumping in to the bandwagon and like learning AI and trying to use AI to just get rich quick, which is a lot what a lot of people are doing. And no shade to them, by the way. Like, if that's your thing, I have friends that are doing it. That's cool. But I don't believe that like going all in on AI is necessarily the right thing right now, like the right skill to go all in on. And I'll share with you in just a second what I do believe is the right skill, like the meta skill underneath them all that will set you up financially for freaking life if you do this. Again, at least in my experience. But my gripe with AI is I love AI. Like, it's an awesome tool to use, freaking fantastic. Like, I use it for so many different things. However, you see all these gurus right now that are preaching this because they're trying to sell crap, right? They're like, here's how to build your coaching business with AI, right? Here, buy my new AI tool. And it's like, it's just a bunch of noise. When the internet first became a thing, you had to learn how to have a website and how to generally use the internet for your business, but it wasn't like the thing that you needed to go all in on and master. Now, certain people might be obsessed with tech and that type of stuff, and that may be for them. But for most of us that are just running coaching businesses or consultants, or we're trying to provide a service for somebody, that's not the thing that you need to go in on. In fact, I think AI is the freaking devil. No, maybe. But in all seriousness, I think AI is actually making people dumber and less skilled. Like, so many people that I talk with as I'm consulting in companies, they don't even know how to, like, the founders don't even know how to write decent copy. They don't know how to actually communicate their messages in a way, which kind of leads us to the meta skill here. It's knowing how to influence and sell. Because if you know how to communicate in a persuasive and influential way, you can now take that skill and you can apply it into your content, so that way your content and your marketing becomes more persuasive and it becomes more effective. So you're generating better leads. You're getting more qualified people that are booking in on your calendar. If you're running a sales call calendar, you're driving more people into your funnels. And so content and ads is a big piece where if you know how to show up and be more persuasive and be able to communicate in a more effective way, it's going to massively help you. But not just that. And I'm going to break down some ways that you could quote unquote sell more naturally in your content here in just a second. But the other part of this is if you're running workshops or VSLs or master classes or webinars, whatever you want to call them, it's going to help you there. It's a meta skill that helps there as well, because now you could show up and you can have better hooks, you can tell better stories, you can have more desirable and compelling call to actions within your webinars, which is going to drive more people to want to buy from you. And then, of course, if you're doing sales calls, of course it's going to help you on sales calls because you're able to shift more beliefs, able to help literally shift behavior, shift thinking and beliefs, which drive behavior. And it's going to help you be able to even be a better coach on the other side of that, because you're going to be able to transform our people by changing their behaviors, because that's what influence in sales really is. It's leadership. It's knowing how to be a thought leader and lead people. And of course, like when it comes to writing copy, knowing how to do that. There's like some little splice off micro skills here, right? But the meta skill underneath them all is influence in sales. And so if we think about how to influence better in your content, I'm going to show you a little cheat sheet that I have. So here in a school community, and I'll link this down below, I have a training called the 7 beliefs to create pre-sold buyers. And the whole premise of this training is that there are 8 core beliefs. I know it's called 7, but I added an 8th. It's kind of like Robert Greene and 50 Cent. He wrote the 48 laws of power, and then there was like a 49th or something, you know, maybe similar. But the concept here is like when you're creating content, part of influence in sales and content is going to be around belief shifting. And there's 8 core beliefs that you have to shift in order to create pre-sold buyers. By the way, if you want to see this whole playbook and you want to watch this workshop that I did, then just click the link down below and you'll be able to access this. But here are the different beliefs, right? The first belief in your content that you need to be able to shift is pain. right? This is what I call the problem belief. And so this is where, your prospect must believe that the real problem is different from what they think it is. So let's say you're in weight loss and you're trying to get better at influencing selling in your content. You need, like, people are like, hey, like, my genetics are what's screwing me up right now, right? They think they have a different problem, but you, as a coach, you probably know what the real problem is. You need to be able to shift that. You need to be like, no, no, no. The problem is that you're trying to diet and eat healthy when you actually need to know how to eat right, right? And so you're introducing them to a new problem, which stretches the gap from where they are, like the pain, it stretches that pain gap. The second belief is going to be around doubt. This is the core belief that we have to shift. So they must doubt that their current approach is the most effective and believe that it's either structurally broken, not just poorly executed. And so, and or they might have to doubt that, like, it going at it alone is not the right choice for them, or it's going to just waste time, money, effort, and that they should be able to seek help, your help. And then, of course, like, this is more top of funnel. So in your Facebook content, maybe your your Facebook or Instagram ads, stuff like that. That's where you would put stuff like this. And then, underneath that, like, more middle of funnel, this could be like on your Instagram and your stories, your emails, if you're doing VSLs or workshops. You want to be able to shift the belief on the method. They must believe that your method is categorically different, not just a better version of what they tried. And so, for example, when I was selling fitness and weight loss back in the day, 5, 6 years ago, I was helping people lose stubborn belly fat. I wasn't just selling them on, like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to eat better. I'm going to teach you how to, like, strength train. They already knew those things. Obviously, they weren't doing it correctly or they would have had results. So I introduced them to my stubborn fat solution, which was my unique vehicle, my unique method. And then I had my different ways of helping them within that solution. And I sold that. And when I got people to believe that this was the one right and only path for them, people would move forward. So you see how, like, just with these few beliefs here, how just your content alone can become more influential, how you can start to drive more people to be curious. Because I could tell you, I had so many DMs, and I still do to this day, when people believe that the vehicle that I'm selling is the right vehicle for them, or there's at least enough curiosity. And then, of course, there's the desire. People, like, must believe that the outcome that they seek is possible, it's emotionally compelling for them, and it is available for somebody in their specific situation. And so I have conversations and do audits with people, a lot of people in the health and fitness and wellness space. And I'm thinking of one person in particular, I won't say their name, but I was doing an audit for them, and she serves women, like middle-aged women who are struggling with low energy, body fat issues, like just a lot of mindset and confident issues. And their hormones are usually wrecked from dieting and such. And so they have a desire, like they're like, I want to be a fit mom, I want to be healthy, I want to look good, blah, blah, blah. But they don't believe that it's possible for them. A lot of them don't. They believe that, hey, I'm in my 40s now. This is just the way life is as a middle-aged mom. Genetically, I just don't think it's possible for me at this point. And so, like, she has to go in there, the person I'm thinking about, she has to be able to shift this belief so that they can see it's possible. And we'll go into some tactics as we end this video with, like, how to specifically do that. But right now, I want you to get the concept of this. And of course, there's identity. People will buy into an identity. Steve Jobs with Apple was extremely good at this. Phil Knight with Nike was extremely good at getting people to buy into an identity. And this helps people get into what they're becoming, not just where they're stuck at. And then, of course, there's more beliefs. We're not going to get into these right now because this is going to be more, bottom of funnel. But, if you are on a sales call, you need to be able to get the urgency, show them that there's a cost of inaction. They need to understand that getting help from an expert is faster than going at it alone. And they need to be able to trust you and know that you're the right person. And so if we think about at the core, like, how do we actually tactically do this? Whether it is in your content, it is in your ads, if it's, you communicating on a workshop, if you're on a sales call, how do you tactically do this? Now, if I'm being real, we could do a whole, like, 2-3 hour workshop on this because there's a lot. There's not just one way, but I want to give you a way that you can start to implement this today. And I'm a freaking poet, and I actually did know it. And so here are the ways that you can actually do it. So, firstly, in order to influence somebody, in order to quote unquote sell somebody, which we're going to go ahead and equate that to leading them properly, you need to know who they are. Like specifically, you can't influence a whole niche, you can influence a person. And so the more clear that you can get on a dream client and what their world is right now, what are they struggling with? Get super specific. What results are they getting that they don't like? What are they venting or complaining about to their friends? What do they keep trying that isn't working? How do they feel when no one's watching them, right? How would they secretly describe themselves right now? What do they say to themselves in private? And then this is like their struggle. This is like their before. Who do they become? So after they implement your solution, who do they become? What's their aspiring identity? What are the desired results that they want? What do they brag about to their friends? What's the new method that you're going to help them with, right? What is your way of doing things? Okay, how do they feel waking up every single morning? How do they describe themselves now that they have the results? What do they say to themselves? The more clear that you can get on their current struggle story and that kind of superhero aspirational identity, the more easily you can influence people with your communication. So you got to start there. Does that make sense? And then the next piece here, and there's two different formulas that you can run with today, is there's a very short form content formula that you can use to where if you want to be able to start to be able to better influence and sell. And again, you can use this in your content, you can use this on sales calls, you can use this as you're writing copy. It really doesn't matter. But if you wanted to say create a reel today or write a post or caption, first you want to call out and name their current belief. So let's say it's weight loss. It's an easy example to use. And let's say they believe right now that their genetics are what's screwing them up and that there's just no way they can start to lose belly fat at 40 years old. You want to call out and name that current belief whenever you're communicating. Secondly, you want to agitate it. So show the consequences of it. You could tell a story about a client. That's usually the easiest way to do that. You can just describe what's going to happen if they don't fix this, but you want to articulate the consequences. And sometimes if you could demonstrate through story, it's even better. And then you want to shift it. That's step 3. So introduce a new belief and back it up with some type of social proof. And again, I like to do this through stories. So for example, let's say that people think that they need a diet to eat or to lose belly fat. And I'm like, well, if you diet, what's going to happen is you're going to screw up your metabolism, you're going to wreck your hormones, and you're actually going to start to gain fat and lose muscle. And that's going to further inhibit the problem, right? So I did step 1 or 2. So now I can say what you need to do is actually learn how to eat right. You need to dial in your calories. You need to get the right proportions. You need to eat the right foods. And so I'm introducing a new method. And then I can say, for example, my client Holly was in the same situation, and here's what and I can back it up. And then number 4 is land it. Okay. Connect to their current identity. To their desired identity. So you could be like, if you do this, you will lose that belly fat. You will have more energy. You will feel freaking amazing, just like my client, Holly. So this is a very simple framework that you can use in pretty much anything, especially if you're trying to create something a little bit shorter form, like a post, a video, could be a YouTube video, a single piece of content. It's fast, it's repeatable, and it works really well. A bit of a longer one. And again, you can dive into the workshop if you want to go into this in depth, but I call it the belief collapse sequence because that's literally what we're doing is collapsing a belief. And so this works better for like workshops and longer form content, but it's similar. You surface the belief, agitate the consequence, you create a crack, basically like you're creating dissonance in what they're currently thinking. You're dismantling, if you will. You reframe the problem, anchor the method, show evidence, and invite the next step. And so here's how that looks in depth. So if you surface the current belief, you could be like, hey, if I just post more content, eventually it'll convert. If I just get more views, eventually I'll get it. Or, hey, I'm just not that good at sales right now, right? That might be a current belief. So I want to surface that inside of my content. The second thing I want to do is to agitate it. So I can say, hey, that's why you're posting daily and you're still chasing DMs, right? I'm agitating the problem. Does that make sense? That's why your calendar still stays half empty. Then I create the crack. And so we're not doing crack. Stay off drugs, kids. But what we are doing is we're creating what's called dissonance. Now, all this is, and there's an amazing book that I read. It's called Sleight of Mouth, and it's a pretty deep read. But there's a book called The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth, and it's a much more practical read. And that's where I learned a lot of this stuff. But first, you want to redefine, right? You want to change the meaning of a word that they're using to justify the old belief, right? So, for example, you call it just giving value. I call it training your audience to never pay. So you get it? You're redefining the meaning of what they of their belief that they think. That's one way to do it. The consequence is like following a belief to its logical end and show them where it leads. So it could be like, hey, if more content was the answer, the coach that's already posting 2 or 3 times a day for years probably would be a millionaire, right? But they're not. Does that make sense? And so we're following the belief to its logical end so we can show them where it actually will lead them. Consequence. The counter example would be giving one undeniable example that makes the old belief impossible to defend. So we could say, hey, my client had 800 followers. She wasn't running any ads, and she was able to sign 11 clients organically in 30 days. So if audience size was the problem, that would be impossible, right? And so we're giving a counterexample to somebody that had a small audience in this example and how they were still able to get clients. And then there's apply to self. So you could turn logic back on itself so they could see the contradiction. So an example of this could be, we'll use weight loss, right? Hey, you say you don't have time, but you have time for 3 hours of Netflix every night. Is that right? And then people would be like, crap, you're right. And then lastly, chunk up. So zoom out to a bigger truth that makes the old belief look small. So we can say something about like if for weight loss as example, we can say, hey, this isn't about just losing 20 pounds. It's about whether your kids grow up watching you take care of yourself or give up. So we're chunking it up to a much bigger worldview that helps put that what they're going through into perspective. Does that make sense? So now that we've opened them up to to their beliefs being shifted, now we can reframe it. This is where the shift actually happens. So all we're doing is replacing an old belief or explanation with a better one. Okay, we're upgrading their model of reality. And so an old one might be, I need more volume for, my ads or content or whatever. The new belief, hey, I need to shift beliefs, then I'll create more pre-sold leads. Old belief could be people can't afford my offer. The new belief is they don't yet believe that it's worth it. So that's what we're doing is helping reframe the problem. If we think about like a picture frame, like an actual picture frame, if there's a picture in there that we're like, I just don't like that picture, we just change the picture. We change, or we could change if we like the picture, but we hate the frame, we could change the frame, right? So that's all we're doing is changing something so they see it differently, they perceive it differently. And then we anchor the new method. So you could have your methodology, your solution, or just kind of an idea. So I could say, hey, that's why you need to create belief shifting content. Hey, that's why you need to learn how to eat right, not just healthy. Hey, that's what I call pre-selling. You see? So we're introducing a new big idea, a new methodology in there. And then, step 6 is show evidence. And so the 5 ways that you could show evidence is personal story. So this could be your own transformation where you went from old belief to new belief. It could be a client story, proof that your belief works for people like them. It could be a relatable analogy. So I could say, if I'm trying to get you to believe that like messaging, you really need to focus on your messaging, saying the right words in the right way, in the right order to the right people in order to get more leads. I could say, imagine going to China and you don't speak any Mandarin, you don't speak any Chinese or whatever, and you're trying to order Chinese food and all they speak is Mandarin or whatever. And it would be a frustrating experience. You might think you're saying the right words, but in reality, they're not understanding you. So therefore, you don't get what you want and they don't get what they want. And so magically, if you knew how to speak Mandarin, you can say those words and get what you want. And so that's how messaging is. So if you're saying what you think you should be saying, but your audience isn't actually signing up with you, they're not paying you, then you're not saying the right words in the right way or in the right order. And so using a relatable analogy can make a an abstract, make the abstract concrete with a comparison to everything everybody understands. So what you don't want to do with this is use something like back in 1922, John C. Rod. Like you don't want to use something that people would have to like they wouldn't know. And of course, you could borrow credibility. You could build trust from an expert or a known figure. Back in weight loss, I used to use like Chris Hemsworth or Scarlett Johansson. Like I would look up what how they trained for the movies, and I would borrow credibility. I'd be like, this is what they're doing. Or I've constantly used like Russell Brunson or Alex Hormozy to kind of back up my points because more people trust them. Does that make sense? So you could borrow credibility. And then, of course, you can use a real world example, like a well known example from outside of your industry that proves the actual principle. Does that make sense? And so, like, in this video, I've used like Steve Jobs. I talked about how Steve Jobs like really helped get people to buy into an identity. That's a real world example from outside of my current industry to try to prove the principle that I'm trying to teach. And then the next step is you have to invite people into a next step. And so this could be getting them to like try something. This could be getting them to DM you. This could be getting them to close on a call. This could be getting them to DM you a keyword. You have to give them a next step. And when you do this effectively, again, we're heavily focusing on content because I think more of us are there, but you can use the same philosophy in workshops and sales calls to be able to get people to move forward. And so that, my friend, hopefully gives you some ideas and tactical things that you can start to practice and apply to master this meta skill in this AI world. Because the more people are leaning into fakeness, into AI, they're becoming dumber, they're becoming less skilled, the more you lean into learning how to influence, the more you're not just going to survive, the more you're going to thrive. And so if you have any questions for me, let me know. If you found this video helpful, click subscribe. And if you want to go deeper into learning how to do this stuff, click the link down below to access the workshop and the playbook that I just walked you through. Have an amazing day. Get out there and let's change some lives. Bye for now.